Previously in actual history.
Slavery for 400 years? For 400 years? That sounds like a choice.
And he was right. Slavery was a choice of every colonizer and colonizer politician that accepted it, benefited from it, and turned the other cheek to it. From the country's inception to 1861, here's a list of our founding fathers who participated in human trafficking. What do I consider as participate? Basically the same thing this man did. I'll give you two a moment. Okay, you ready? Let's get it. Good old George Washington with a whopping 600 plus kidnapped human beings. John Adams, the first one, who supposedly had no dealings with enslaved Africans, but semantics. He opposed emancipation of them, because what's empathy for a human life in bondage, you know? Still can't top my man's George, am I right? Thomas Jefferson, right there with him, with 600 plus, making a tie at first place on being a piece. Up next, James Madison, lowering that number down to 100 plus humans, ransacked from their homes to give their children and great-grandchildren to the cause of white supremacy. James Monroe with a modest 75 trafficked human beings. Okay, James. The noble John Quincy Adams with no record of enslaving human beings even helped some enslaved human beings from escaping punishment by U.S. courts. Amistad. But also did not mind being waited on by his wife's hostages, you know? Also a little questionable at times whether his motives were out of human rights or because he really didn't like the power of those pesky trafficking elite. Ugh, those guys. Then there was Andrew Jackson standing in for the old true and blue American ways at 200 African hostages in his backyard. Martin Van Buren with only one human being imprisoned for no reason but to serve his every need and fought to return escaped African hostages to their captor. William Henry Harrison with a magic 11 human hostages. John Tyler ready to drive those numbers back up to 29 because, hey, he's got a lot of money to make. James Polk with 56 human beings forced to be the spine of his family business for the price of their and their children's lives. Small price, huh? Zachary Taylor, true blue with 300 Africans held hostage because America. Millard Fillmore with an honorable 0 and did equally and absolutely 0 for enslaved Africans because he didn't want to get into that. You know how it is. Politics. I mean, that is unless you consider vehemently opposing the Emancipation Proclamation and signing the Fugitive Slave Act, making it legal to return runaway hostages to their traffickers. I mean, whatever. He was morally opposed. Franklin Pierce was pro-slavery, though we don't exactly know his body count. James Buchanan was a modest below 10 human victims, and the admirable Abe Lincoln, who emancipated African Americans as a political move to cripple the South and wanted Africans to go back to Africa afterward. Okay, it's fantastic. Just when you thought it was over by now, Andrew Johnson, a proud trafficker. Ulysses Grant, because his wife made him do it. I mean, even the ones who were supposedly morally against it, a popular politically correct saying at the time for folks likely trying to get votes but largely stay out of it, which really means, you know, benefit from it. You know how the whole white supremacy thing worked. What? They weren't white supremacists? Man, that's interesting because I'm pretty sure that's what Manifest Destiny meant. No? Yeah. It's no wonder human trafficking has been a long-held tradition among American elite, right? Oh, but hey, it's okay. Because in the year 1610, a Catholic priest in the Americas named Father Sandoval wrote back to a church functionary in Europe to ask if the capture, transport, and enslavement of African blacks was legal by church doctrine. In response, a church member wrote,
"Your reverence writes me that you would like to know whether the Negroes who are sent to your parts have been legally captured. To this I replied that I think your reverence should have no scruples on this point, because this is a matter which has been questioned by the Board of Conscience in Lisbon, and all its members are learned and conscientious men. Nor did the bishops who were in Sao Tome, Cape Verde, and here Loando, all learned and virtuous men, find fault with it. We have been here ourselves for 40 years, and there have been among us very learned fathers. Never did they consider the trade as illicit. Therefore, we and the fathers of Brazil buy these slaves for our service without any scruple."
which basically means your founding fathers were sadists, to put it gently. And before you go spouting familiar propaganda like, I mean, it was the culture of the times, it was hard to avoid it, you can save it. Because you can also choose not to traffic human beings and, like, you know, do your own labor or pay people to, just like these guys. Francis Daniel Pastors of Germantown, Pennsylvania, who drafted the 1688 Germantown Quaker petition against slavery, where he condemned the practice of slavery as anti-Christian in the Quaker community that at the time was up to 70% knee-deep in trafficking humans for profit. Some other notable invaders who were for taking over other people's land, but against human trafficking were William Lloyd Garrison, Angelina Grimke, John Brown, Harriet Beecher Stowe, and Cassius Marcellus Clay. All the likes of whom presidents like John Adams considered entirely too radical. I mean, free all the hostages at once. I mean, who does that? Or this noble white guy interviewed by ABC TV, who heroically believed black people should have the same rights as their white counterparts.
Going on about how he believed in giving blacks the right to go to school, giving them the right to vote, giving them the right to go into anything they qualified for. And then he said he experienced an epiphany.
I was sitting out on a wagon tongue with this old black man and was telling him what a different kind of white man I was. I remember him looking at me very sadly and kind of sweetly and condescending and said, you know, you still got the disease, honey. I know you think you're cured, but you're not cured. You can't give me the right to be a human being. I'm born with that right. Now, you can keep me from having that. If you've got all the policemen and all the jobs on your side, you can deprive me of it. But you can't give it to me. And I'm born with it just like you was. My God, it had a profound effect on me. I was furious with him. But the more I reflected on it, the more profoundly it affected me.
In conclusion, when the norm for your folks is greed and sadism, you're not exactly a hero for not buying in. You just realized everybody else is the devil, you know? And you might be saying, well, hey, Africans had slaves too. Yeah, Africans, yeah. But, I mean, you'd technically be right. Except African slavery was absolutely nothing like American chattel slavery, the worst human enslavement in the history of the planet by historian standards, for reasons discussed in the last video. Let's revisit the whipping, shackling, hanging, beating, breeding, burning, mutilation, rape, imprisonment, branding, multiple levels of emotional and physical abuse, denial of education, indefinite enslavement. Yeah, all right, but what did African slavery look like then? Okay, well, let's start here. See...